The last smoldering embers of the campfire hissed in protest as Jack drowned them with a bucket of water before stepping into the camper where his family waited. The trip was supposed to be an escape, a brief refuge from the chaos that had consumed their home. The night was cold and still, aside from the crickets arguing with the silence. Smoke clung to Jack's clothes, but a sour feeling festered in his gut. The woods were supposed to bury the chaos, but the silence deceived. The sound cut through the silence of the night. Jack lurched upright, dread snapping into recognition. He rushed to the door. This time, from the roof. Janet and the girls were awake now, their panic rising in the dark. Jack forced his voice steady, trying to sound calm and collected, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Jack opened the door and stepped out into the cold night air. The crickets were hushed, and the woods towered around him, looming in ominous silence. "Who's out there?" Jack called. Fear thick in his throat, exposing the frailty of his forced bravado. His hands shook as he wrestled with the flashlight. Then it clicked on, a thin blade of light cutting into the wood's cold silence. There was nobody out there. He walked around the camper, scanning the trees with his flashlight, desperately trying to identify the cause of the knocking, but he saw nothing. As he approached the door to the camper, he heard one of the girls scream from inside. He tore open the door and hurried in. Janet and the girls were pressed into the corner, faces pale, eyes wide with terror. Before Jack had a chance to ask what had happened, Heather spoke up. "It's not out there. The knocking is coming from inside the camper." I'm Jesse Wilkins with the Hometown Ghost Stories podcast, and this is Talk Is Jericho, the true story of the Smurl family haunting.
All right, so we're back here with Hometown Ghost Stories. You guys have probably made, 4 or 5 appearances on here. You're rivaling Paul Stanley and Bruce Dickinson for most appearances. But I trust you guys so much. Right before we started, I said, "What are we talking about again?" So once again, I don't even have to do any type of preparation with you guys. I just get to sit back and enjoy the show like everybody else. So why don't you tell us what we're going to be talking about today? Because I know it involves The Conjuring, of course, very famous series of movies. And the new one has just come out or is about to come out, depending when we air this. And we thought we'd tie it in together, but kind of go all in on what we're doing today here, guys.
Yeah, we're talking about the Smurl family haunting, which, as you mentioned, is the premise of the new Conjuring movie, The Last Rites. And we actually did see the movie, so we can tell you that the movie, although it's a movie and it's fun, it does not cover what actually happened in this haunting. So you're going to get the real story today.
Isn't that kind of always because I remember I had Andrea Perron on before years ago, who was the original family that was haunted by The Conjuring. She had the same thing. Our family wasn't quite too happy with it because it's so far off. It's like, well, obviously there's some Hollywood elements to it. So this is a different family then. This is the Smurl family. Same house or different house?
Different house. This one's in Pennsylvania. And if the Perron family were upset about their story not being accurate, the Smurl family, I haven't looked into what they've thought about this, but it basically doesn't tell the Smurl story at all. But it's a Conjuring movie. It has its jump scares. It was fun, but yeah.
Did you guys know this story before you went and saw the movie?
Yeah, we did. Yep.
Okay, so you knew what you were kind of expecting, and then what? Of course. Well, let's not worry about the Hollywood version. Like we said, it's Hollywood. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. As we even knew with the Lutz family or Lutz family, or whatever, from Amityville Horror. But why don't you tell us the real story of the Smurl family here today?
Absolutely. And if anybody who's listening hasn't seen the new Conjuring movie yet, like we said, it's a totally different story. So this isn't going to spoil it. So you don't have to worry about that. But as Jesse said, this takes place in Pennsylvania, more specifically West Pittston, Pennsylvania, which is kind of an unremarkable town, but it's known mostly for mining. And in the 1800s, there were a lot of mining disasters that happened in this town. And the reason I bring that up is because it's relevant to one of the theories as to what might have been the origin of this haunting, and we can bring it back to that later. But where the Smurl family story starts is in 1973, Jack and Janet Smurl moved into a duplex on Chase Street. Flood damage from Hurricane Agnes had left this house in need of some serious repairs. So Jack's parents moved into the other side of the duplex, which created this perfect arrangement so that they could work on their side and have the parents on the other side. So it worked out pretty well.
And we start off this story immediately with the worst two names in the history of mankind. Smurl, probably the worst last name I've ever heard in my life, and Agnes, which has been retired, fittingly.
If that's not sounding like a haunted person, Agnes Smurl.
Yeah.
What it is.
And this might have been a perfect scenario for them for like babysitting and stuff. But if I were in a duplex next to my in-laws, I would put my head through a wall and then take my head back through the wall because I'm like, oh God, now I'm looking at them.
So while it may have seemed like a perfect setup, small problems appeared almost immediately. And it was problems that they were able to attribute to the renovations themselves. So there would be foul odors, sharp and rotten. They would drift from one room to the other, vanishing almost as quickly as they came. Fresh paint was marred with scratches overnight. Tools disappeared, only to be found later in strange places. Plumbing and electrical systems failed with no clear cause. But again, they just chalked it up to things that would go on during renovations. By 1975, stranger events were unfolding. One night, Dawn, who was one of the Smurls' daughters, told her parents that she had seen people floating around her bedroom, which is terrifying. Parents obviously run in to check, but they found nothing except an empty room.
Just you're talking about floating, like kind of hovering and kind of flying around the room sort of thing.
Yep. And you're a parent, you hear your kids say things like that. You probably brush it off as, the kid's imagination or a nightmare or what have you. But when you put everything that's happening all together collectively, you can kind of deduce that we have.
Well, it's funny too. That's why I wanted to clarify, because you were talking about the hurricane and the hurricane damage and the water damage. And I thought, like, are they floating? Like, is the water it's floating? So I'm glad we clarified that.
Yeah, no, that would be.
Either way, it's pretty scary though. Yeah, for sure.
Agreed.
That's probably a haunting you'll see on one of your cruises at some point, Chris.
I've experienced it many times. All right.
So things continued to escalate for the next couple of years. Toilets would flush on their own. Chairs would move across the floor without being touched. There was one instance where Jack felt a phantom hand brush gently against his shoulder, even though nobody was behind him. And then there's another instance where Janet was doing laundry in the basement when she heard her name being called from the darkness. Then, in 1977, the couple welcomed twin daughters, Karen and Sharon. But
I'm throwing out in the pool for Smurl and Angus. Karen and Sharon. Come on, man. John and John.
Yep.
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
They did the things that everybody does with twins, or most people do with twins. I actually have twins, and we intentionally named them completely different names.
Yeah, I have twins as well. Same thing. Cheyenne and Sierra. You can't get that mixed up.
Yeah.
Dave's are named Smurl and Agnes. It's a perfect combination.
So they had the twins, but the joy was shadowed by the sense that something unseen was watching them. At night, shadowy shapes slipped through the rooms, and a sulfur-like smell grew so strong it sometimes made the family sick.
Yeah, and one thing I think is important to point out before we continue is we brought up Amityville at the beginning of this story.
Yeah.
Amityville was 1 month. That haunting was like 1 month. We're already years into this haunting.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So like
it goes back to the Eddie Murphy thing, like, get out. Like, I'm out of here. Like, why are we staying here for years with all of this stuff going on?
That's a common question that people ask about people who live in haunted houses for years and years and years. But the thing to consider is a lot of people, when they buy these houses, they're huge investments. And this one in particular was an investment property, right? It's a duplex and they were renovating it. So they probably had all their money sunk into this property. So just up and leaving financially just isn't an issue. I mean, isn't an option for a lot of people. And this,
especially because a lot of these hauntings, I mean, the wife Janet started seeing stuff, the kids were seeing stuff, but like many haunted, stories of poltergeist activity or demonic hauntings or whatever, the father in this situation was, this is Jack. He's just kind of not into it. He's just dismissing it. He's like, the house is under construction. Of course, things are getting moved around. It's a big project. The kids are just being kids. They're being scared. And, you see this in almost every single, it's almost like a horror movie trope where the dad's like, it's not haunted. And eventually things change.
So towards the end of the decade and into the early 80s, the disturbances became violent. The smell of rotting flesh would fill the air. Appliances broke without cause. One television set burst into flames. Heavy furniture would shift across the floor. Knocks rattled the walls so heavily that they shook the entire house. There was one instance where Janet was actually slapped, scratched, and pushed by unseen hands. Jack, at this point, who was beginning to experience the hauntings, also had his own experience where he described sexual assaults by something inhuman while he was sleeping.
Hold on. What do you mean sexual assaults? What is he talking about here?
A succubus. You ever heard of a succubus?
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
Yeah.
Succubus is
like saying that. Jesse.
It's a gross word. We don't like it. we won't say it anymore on the show.
Because a succubus is a female and an incubus is a male, right?
correct.
So what kind of assaults was he experiencing?
So these were instances of sleep paralysis demons. So he would wake up in the middle of the night, he'd be completely paralyzed, and there would be some horrible, disgusting creature on top of him, sexually assaulting him. And he would describe this on more than one occasion.
Yeah, he described it as having like scales and like basically rotting flesh. Like it would seem like a dead person. So
And green pussy, and like green pussy stuff like coming out of the body, and she almost had like this glow to her. So he thought he was sleeping, and then he would wake up and his entire body would be sore.
So it's almost like if you look for someone to envision like the ghost in The Shining that comes out of the bathtub, like some rotting woman. Yeah,
that's exactly the comparison I was just about to make. It reminds me, the way it described was just like that scene in The Shining with Jack Torrance, and the beautiful woman morphed into that ugly old creature.
Yeah. All jokes aside, I mean, that's terrifying because that, you hear these stories and that would be completely terrible.
Yeah. So what Jesse had mentioned it earlier is that Jack thought, or maybe it was Rob, but he said that Jack thought that he was dreaming. And after this first assault, he woke up and he was down in the kitchen the next morning, and he was not going to mention it. But one of his daughters came in. She said, "I just had the worst nightmare. I dreamed," and she described the same horrible creature attacking Dad while he's asleep. So the daughter had a dream. I think they shared the same dream.
Just let me interject once again. Have you heard of this before, where something happens, to the father and the daughter's dreaming? It's almost like there's a collective psychic message being sent out to the whole family here.
Yeah, it's believed that it's a demon trying to oppress the family, basically. So there's 3 stages of a demonic infestation, and the first stage is the infestation stage, where you start to see things moving around and the demon's kind of messing around a little bit. And then it'll pick a victim, and it'll start the oppression stage, which is stage 2, where they're actually targeting a specific person, and they can target that one person by sending visions to other people, or in the household, trying to attach itself. And then the third phase is possession, when they actually gain control of the person. And that's when usually an exorcism is needed. This seems to be in the infestation phase here, and possibly kind of going into the oppression phase. But there were all sorts of things going on here, including Jack being attacked and Janet being attacked. And even the dog was attacked too. Simon, the family dog, was thrown into a wall by an unseen force. So not even the dog was exempt from the demonic attacks.
Nor was the dog exempt for the dumb names.
Yeah, I know. Simon.
The dog's name is Simon.
Simon Smurl.
Oh, it's even worse with the last name.
But once again, that's terrible. Even, this is just a family in the midst of a very high level haunting here, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. There was actually even one instance where Janet said that she watched the dog dematerialize in front of her eyes, which I don't know how you explain that, but then reappear immediately. So that's a weird detail.
Well, maybe, once again, where some people think ghosts are from a different dimension or something like that, and they're kind of caught between two worlds. Maybe that's how he dematerialized. Maybe he took a trip to the other dimension for a bit. I mean, who knows, right?
It's so strange. I've never seen it with any kind of living creature before, but you do hear about this in many, especially poltergeist cases, where items will disappear and then reappear somewhere else. And you actually had that early in this haunting. Never seen it with a dog or a human or anything before, but so it makes it unique.
But under that, we have had a few cases that we've covered where people have like gone to sleep and woken up different places without knowing how they got there.
Sleepwalking, maybe, or
that's what I would assume, or a great night out. But like I think that's could be something that we've never considered.
Yeah,
but maybe we should look into it.
Yeah, that and like the doppelganger thing is strange. You get that at a lot of haunted locations. Like we've covered stories where someone will be talking to an investigator on like the second floor, and then they find out later that he never left the third floor the entire night. And you're like, well, how is this possible? And they float around the idea of doppelganger stuff, but this would be the opposite of that. Yeah,
I'm hoping we never have that happen because we've been starting to go to a lot more haunted locations. And I don't want to talk to Jesse and then walk downstairs and there's Jesse on a different floor.
Yeah, some say there's already too much Jesse in an investigation. You don't need one on every floor.
I agree.
Too many Wilkins, I think, on this show.
That's right. Yeah.
That's what they say.
So continue on. So poor Simon takes a bump into the wall, and then what happens next?
And dematerializes. But so then in 1984, there was another weird thing that happened. Janet was in the living room when a faceless figure in a black cape rushed past her, disappearing into the kitchen. It was over in seconds, but the sight left her pretty shaken. The next day, she was visiting her mother-in-law, who lived on the other side of the duplex, and she began describing the exact same thing. The same caped, faceless figure racing through her living room and vanishing. Neither woman had spoken beforehand, yet their stories matched perfectly.
I wonder if the timing matched up where it went through one wall and then through the other apartment. It's very possible.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Definitely Jack the Ripper.
Yeah,
we solved it.
Figured it out.
By 1985, life in the Smurl home had become pretty much a siege. One summer night, Janet jolted out of her sleep. Something had latched onto her ankle and was dragging her down the bed. Her scream tore through the night, waking Jack. He lunged to pull her back, but his body went rigid, frozen by some unseen force. Janet clawed at the sheets, sliding toward the edge of the bed. At that moment, Simon barked furiously from the floor, and he was lifted and slammed into the wall again by something that didn't seem to be there. And just like that, as suddenly as it began, it all stopped. Janet collapsed onto the bed, clutching her ankle, while Jack sat paralyzed in shock, staring at the end of the mattress where the attack had begun. But the silence didn't last. From inside the walls came a pounding so loud that the plaster rattled and the picture shook. Moments later, a heavy wing-like flapping sound swept through the house. Not fading like footsteps, but passing through the walls as though whatever made it was too large for the rooms to contain. So this was a weird night, obviously, because obviously Janet's being dragged out of bed, the dog's being thrown around again, and Jack seems like he's experiencing that same sort of sleep paralysis where he's awake, but he can't move and he couldn't help. So this instance was particularly tough for him because he felt so helpless while his wife and dog are being attacked.
What I find interesting about this one too, and it's going to sound kind of funny, but if we go back to the succubus thing, this is right after they had finished, having fun in the bed together. We'll say
you can say sex. It's okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to make sure you don't get demonetized here, Chris. I'm very nice.
So some of the ones we have up, this is nothing.
So yes, right after the parents had sex is when this happened, is when she gets grabbed. And I'm like, is that some sort of jealousy from the succubus or something? Yeah. And it just like went crazy because they had laid claim to Jack at that point in time. Right. So I don't know if that's
you could have a point there, right? It makes sense. Yeah.
But their biggest flaw there was get the dog out of the room if you're going to do that with each other. Don't make the dog watch. Come on.
Yeah, but dude, this house. The other thing about this house too that we should outline, it's a duplex and they have so many kids that there's just not a lot of room in this place either. We see this a lot with the hauntings where everyone's so claustrophobic. That's the other thing. It's like they hear people walking down the hall and you're like, well, is that one of the kids? Is that one of the parents? Like, is that the in-laws on the other side of the wall? There's a lot going on in this house and there's a lot of people in this house as well.
How many kids are in the house?
4.
Okay.
Yeah, so 6 people, well, 8 people, including the parents on the other side.
Yeah.
Altogether. The Smurls were pretty shaken at this point, and they decided to just get out of the house for a while to see if that would kind of settle things down. So they packed their daughters and went on a camping trip. And it was their first attempt to leave the property behind. But the haunting followed them. The first night, they were jolted awake by the same heavy banging that they had heard in the duplex. This time it was on the camper wall. Jack went outside to check the perimeter, but he saw nothing. And as he was just circling the camper, he heard a scream come from inside. He rushed back in to learn that his family had seen a tall shadow figure standing inside the camper. At this point, it was apparent to them that whatever was haunting them wasn't just haunting the house, it was haunting them personally, which is...
This is another reason that, like, when you have so many of these haunted houses, and you brought it up earlier, Chris, which was like, why don't you just get out of the house and leave? Right? That would be everyone's first reaction. Like, oh, this house is haunted, we got to get up and go. Yeah. So, I mean, they couldn't do that for financial reasons, but you see that even when they did get out of the house, like, all right, we're going camping. We're going to go on vacation. We're going to the middle of the woods. Whatever's haunting that house, it can haunt the house while we're gone. And that just wasn't the case. It followed them. And you see that some hauntings, they attach themselves to a location. And some of the more serious hauntings, they seem to attach themselves to people. And that's what we have in this case, because it followed them right into the woods.
Well, actually, in this case, we have both, because while they were away camping and the spirit had followed them, it was also still at the house, because while they were away, neighbors had been hearing loud banging and the loud flapping noise coming from inside the house as they walked by it. And
what the hell is the flapping noise? Like that's what I want to know. What is
maybe, or some kind of a demon wing?
I don't know. It sticks out because it's distinct. Like, you don't hear this in other hauntings. You know, you'll get like footsteps in almost every haunting, or disembodied knocks or voices or whatever, but I've never heard flapping in any other story. And
it's interesting too, because speaking with Andrea, she was telling me that as they went to other houses that they were still haunted, and it wasn't necessarily the house that's haunted, it's the people. Like you mentioned, something gets attached to you. But here we have an example of maybe if it's attached to them while they're camping, but there's another entity in the house causing the problem, unless it can be in two places at once. But it seems like there's multiple entities in this house and attached to this family.
Yeah, it seems like something stayed behind and something different.
Yeah,
all of them. And later on, when the Warrens get involved, I believe Lorraine had said that she felt the presence of at least 3 powerful entities inside that house. But we'll get into more details once they get involved in the case.
Yeah. The other thing interesting about the parent haunting is all the daughters there were all the children there were daughters as well.
Yeah,
like
right.
The Smurl house. Right. So that's interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
Yep. So while the family was away, neighbors were hearing things. Also, Janet's friend Erin Turner called the house to check in, not knowing the family was away. And to her surprise, the phone was answered on the first ring by a little girl. Erin asked if her mother was home, and the little girl answered in a very calm, cold voice, said, "They don't live here anymore."
Wow.
And the line went dead. Later,
perfect chance for you to do some voice acting, Dave. You could have tried to really embody a 5-year-old girl and knock out that line.
It was an Australian 5-year-old girl, if that helps with the accent.
Yeah, perfect. I don't think I can do it. Later on, Erin had learned that the house had been locked and empty and nobody was in there to answer the phone. So that was weird.
I mean, this whole thing is weird. Yeah, for sure. And once again, this is some high level stuff for them to still hang in there and not want to run screaming from the house. It's I don't know if it's insanity or bravery, but somewhere in between probably.
Yeah, well, they tried, right? They tried to get out of the house to go on the camping trip, and it followed them. So now they're in a situation where even if we leave, it's just going to follow us to the next house.
Right.
Soon after the camping trip, a family friend urged the Smurls to contact Ed and Lorraine Warren. Ed and Lorraine Warren, if your listeners don't know, were famous demonologists from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and they would often help out in cases like this.
Well, and they're the lead characters in the Conjuring movies as well, right?
Yep. They're the two characters played by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga.
Right. Exactly. So that's Ed and Lorraine for sure.
Yep. They are very much the lead characters in the new movie.
Yeah. Very much so. So they arrived with their psychic medium, Diane, and they declared that there were 3 human spirits and 1 inhuman entity haunting the duplex. So during the Warrens...
Okay.
Yeah, so that explains. So the demon which typically attaches itself to people, would be the one that followed them to the camping trip in theory, and then the residual haunts would be the one still at the house.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So during their initial visit, the Warrens requested that they were brought to the master bedroom so that they could play Ave Maria, which seems like an odd request, but apparently it worked, because instantly the dressers and drawers rattled and the mirrors shook violently until Ed prayed out loud and everything went still.
And good news,
Now-
Chris. There's a 10-hour version on YouTube now that Jesse found, in case you ever need it.
we'll do the Reader's Digest version here.
Let's just cut to a clip and play the whole thing right now.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
You don't have 10 hours, Chris?
But it's still crazy. 3 spirits and 1 demon. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing about like demons with other spirits, there's a theory that demons within a house with other spirits can manipulate those spirits to kind of do their bidding.
So demon would be like the highest of the food chain, and the spirits are kind of like lesser thans, I guess.
They're kind of different. They're different they're different entities altogether, right?
Yeah.
Demons are typically not human spirits, whereas a ghost would be like the ghost of a person who died, whereas demons, depending on if you're religious or not, demon would be like an old biblical, agent of the devil, or if you're an atheist, then a demon could just be a malignant spirit that isn't attached to any sort of human. So that's kind of the difference. But yeah, demons would be more powerful than ghosts.
And then you have a hierarchy of demons, of which level of demon they are as well. So
yeah, interesting.
But it's believed that they were dealing with something pretty serious here at this one.
Well, absolutely.
So the Warrens are involved now, but the hauntings don't stop. Another night, unplugged televisions glowed so brightly that you couldn't even look at them. Jack shouted at the demon and patrolled the house all night with Simon at his side. So you start to see the family starting to kind of crack at this point. On another occasion, he was woken by the sound of talking. He sat up in bed and he saw 2 women standing in his bedroom. One was old, one was younger. Both were dressed in period clothing, and they were sneering at him coldly before walking backwards and vanishing into the closet. And for whatever reason, this, for me, is like the most horrifying imagery.
Yeah, you get people getting slammed against walls, dogs being hurt and everything. And for some reason, this is the most horrifying story for me in this entire thing.
Yeah, it's just like visually, it seems disturbing.
Yeah, and it's very reminiscent to a haunting that happened at the Hinsdale house, where one of the children was in the room. She was sick, and the mother walked in, and there was 2 spirits outside the window that she saw talking.
Jeez.
And as she walked in and saw them, they said they were talking about how they could make the child more sick in order to control possession of that child.
Yeah.
And then as they saw the mother, they said, "Stop, she's going to hear us." And then they disappeared. So
This was seeing a demon outside the window.
or that's what we think. We think that either a demon or spirits that were that are under the control of demons. So yeah, it's a similar situation as that.
That's pretty creepy, man, for sure.
On another one of the Warrens' visits, Lorraine described the demon. So Lorraine is a clairvoyant, which means that she can see ghosts and she has visions of spiritual events sometimes. So she had told the family that the demon never stands up straight. It's always hunched over, and it would try to twist their perception of reality. And she claimed that she had seen it once standing outside the twins' window staring in. So that kind of answers some of the questions about, why the family was possibly sharing dreams and nightmares and whatnot. And that's basically the demon tormenting them, trying to make them go insane, basically.
That's so creepy to think about, like just the demon sitting outside the window, looking in, just manipulating dreams.
No, absolutely.
Horrifying stuff.
By far, it's terrible.
Absolutely.
Wow.
A quick aside, real fast. You're a fan of The Exorcist, right, Chris?
Yeah.
So in the middle of all of this, Jason Miller, he played Father Karras in the movie. He lived in Scranton, which is like a few towns over. He just came. He was just like, I'm just going to go check this out in the middle of all the haunting. He just came and checked out the house. Yeah. So crazy.
Yeah. This story had gained national news at one point, and all the headlines, and people were showing up and standing out in front of the house, especially because the Warrens were pretty high profile at the time. So anytime they get involved in a story, it would become a very large story. So the family had that to add to the stress also.
And you know how small towns are.
Yeah.
One thing happens in a small town, and that is what everyone is going to focus on.
Yeah. Word gets around, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm. So the Warrens had a priest brought to bless the house at this point, still trying to solve this issue. And while the Warrens weren't present while the house was being blessed, while it was happening, Ed was strangled by an unseen force at his home in Connecticut. Whatever it was that was strangling him hissed at him, calling him a dirty bastard and threatening him. And this was going on as the house was being blessed. The theory behind that is they believe that when a demon is trying to oppress somebody, that anyone who tries to intervene, the demon will try to prevent that from happening.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they believe that was about.
At least it had good trash talk, though. Like, imagine getting strangled by a demon. It's like, all right, you knucklehead. You know, as it's trying to strangle you.
Just
Fallen angel. Wow.
Butthead. Yeah.
So throughout this whole ordeal, Janet had been frantically trying to get a hold of her diocese that she grew up attending the Catholic Church, and they just refused to help her. Time after time, she would call and they just wouldn't help. And the church was notorious for not helping every single case of a haunting because it was bad press if it ends up being a hoax, and they don't want that embarrassment. So they would just rebuff her time and time again, which was a huge put off for her because she had grown up in this church and she trusted them and she kind of felt betrayed. So she ended up calling the diocese again to try and hopefully get them to come around. And she spoke with a priest who introduced himself as Father Calloway. He had promised to help. So she was surprised. She was like, this is great. Finally, I'm getting an answer. And she got off the phone with him and she told Jack and said, this is great news. The diocese agreed to help. They're going to send somebody named Father Calloway. So the next day, they're supposed to hear from this Father Calloway, and they didn't. So Jack called up the diocese and he asked to speak to Father Calloway, and they told him that no such priest existed.
Oh my
There
God.
is no Father Calloway.
That's crazy. What would that be? Some sort of a spirit intercepting the call?
That's what they think. They think it was the demon just messing with them, because when it's in this oppression stage, it's trying to drive you mad. So it's almost like it gave her a little sliver of hope and then just stomped on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the second phone-related haunting at this house, because the first one we talked about earlier was when someone called the house.
Little girl.
And we see this a lot. Like, weirdly enough, the phone haunting is common, but one of the places it's most common is hotels, where either phantom calls will go to a room and people will pick up and it's either just static or breathing.
Right.
But it also goes in reverse, where a room will call the front desk and they'll pick it up and it'll either be static or breathing. And then they'll look up the room and there's no one staying in that room. So phones is a weirdly, I mean, not that they exist anymore. We're all old enough to remember them, but yeah, they are a common item that is associated with hauntings.
Conduit, if you will, right? Yeah.
Yeah. When I heard about this part of the story, it didn't really strike me as like the demon just messing with them. This struck me as like a stall tactic, where the demon clearly knew that there was a potential exorcism on the horizon. They knew that the Warrens were in there to help, went back to, followed Ed to Connecticut, strangled him, threatened him there. Then this phone call happens where they know she's trying to actively get a hold of the church to get an exorcist in there. And the demon probably knows that's it for me if they actually get a legitimate exorcism in here. So I think it was like another stall tactic where he was like, yeah, I'm the priest. Yeah, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. But
yeah, that's crazy.
It's weird.
So they told the Warrens about the situation with the make-believe priest, and they're like, all right, we're going to bring in our own guy. So he contacted Father McKenna, who was a traditionalist priest who had assisted them on some exorcisms that they had sat in the past, and they sent for him. So he was going to come and perform an exorcism on the house. So typically when you're doing exorcisms, you're not exorcising the person as a first, as your first attempt. You're going to try and exorcise the house. So if there's a demonic entity in the house, you can get rid of it that way. Also, none of the family members had really had any symptoms of like a full-on demonic possession at this point. So you wouldn't exorcise a person either. So they were going to try exorcising the house. So he's on his way to the house, and Ed and Lorraine Warren are on their way to the house. And while they're driving from Connecticut to Pennsylvania, Ed suffers a heart attack. and has to pull over, and he is unable to obviously now join in on this. So Ed was having heart conditions at this point in his life anyways, so you could dismiss it as it was just a coincidence, but they believe that this was the demon attacking Ed for trying to intervene. And it did prevent them from coming to the house, but it did not prevent Father McKenna from actually coming in and performing the exorcism on the house. He arrived and he went from room to room, blessing each one. And halfway through, the family heard this childlike scream coming from upstairs. Terrifying, but the priest went on and sprinkled holy water and finished the rites. And the moment that the final blessing was spoken, the screaming stopped. And for a time, the house was quiet. But the relief was short-lived.
Child voices are terrifying. I hate when we get child voices. One of the scariest things we've ever captured. We were at Emily's Bridge, and we might have told this story before, but Dave was just doing some stuff on the voice recorder. And Emily's Bridge is a whole other story, but it's supposed to be a young girl in her teens that passed away at the bridge. And he's just like, is anyone there? We're just testing equipment. We're not even trying to do an investigation. And he's playing it back and he's like, is anyone there? And on the voice recorder, it was just behind you in a little girl's voice. Jeez. And I've never seen Dave run so fast, is what I will say.
No, but I mean, it is creepy because once again, you know, children singing, I think, has been drilled into our heads since we were kids from movies that it's, you know, foreboding evil things. So if you actually heard it for real, of course it would scare you, you know, like if you heard like I mean, that would be creepy, but that's what a demon should sound like, not talking to you like a little Australian girl.
Yeah. You're almost like, I'll roll my sleeves up for this.
Yeah.
But you hear,
yeah.
Yeah, when you hear that, you're like, nope, no thanks. No time to interact with that situation.
So you're saying that worked for a little while, but then, as Stephen King would say, sometimes they come back.
Yep, he would say that, and that was the case. So they did the exorcism on the house, and it seemed to work for a little while. They had this little reprieve, so they were obviously feeling relief in this, and they thought they had it solved, but it only lasted a couple of weeks because the activity resumed as if it never stopped. Janet reported being slapped and shoved. Jack described renewed assaults. The scratching in the walls returned, as did the sound of the massive wings flapping through the rooms. By this time, the haunting had become public, as I mentioned earlier. Newspapers covered the story. The Warrens held press conferences urging the Catholic Church to intervene. Neighbors were basically standing out front all day long trying to just witness something, and a lot of them did. So you didn't just have a family and the Warrens experiencing things. You had neighbors experiencing these things too. Neighbors were interviewed by the news and whatnot. This was a huge story. So as if it wasn't enough that the Smurls are being bothered day in and day out by these spirits, they're also being bothered by the press and by neighbors and by complete strangers standing out in front of their house at all hours of the night.
Wow.
Yeah, and harassing them. Like they were having like bricks thrown through the window and stuff. Like this wasn't all nice people. It was also your crazy people who's like, there's no ghosts in there, and they just assault the family for whatever reason.
Yeah. But why were they assaulting the family? Because they thought they were crazy, or because they thought they were bringing ghosts into their neighborhood?
No, I think they didn't believe, and I think it was more of like, you're just attention seekers, and you're trying to do this for the money and everything, and they were just mad at it. But, I mean, there's no reasoning why people would act like that, but probably just angry neighbors. Like, dude, get these people. There's pictures you can look them up online of how much chaos was in front of the house. It wasn't just a couple people standing in the yard. It was like a block party, basically, of just curious people. They have, police out there. They got to do, they got to set up. So it's obviously a huge pain in the ass for the neighbors where they're blocking the road, so.
But this is a tale as old as time with hauntings as well. Because if we go back and we talk about the Surrey poltergeist, which happened in Georgia, which was one of the most haunted locations in Georgia at the time. It was so haunted that people were coming from France and England to that house to see the hauntings. They started a train station there just to stop to check out the house. And people would walk through the house at the time. They would let people just walk through, and they would see plates flying and stuff like that. And people would come out and they'd be upset to be like, I think we saw too much. We saw too much haunting. It's like, you just can't make people happy, man.
Yeah, and the neighbors were pretty divided on this. Some believed, some didn't believe. So it was a stressful situation for the Smurls. And eventually they just had enough. 1987, they just succumbed to all the pressure and they just moved out, and they moved back to Wilkes-Barre, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. Wilkes-Barre was the town in Pennsylvania where they had lived before they moved to Pittsfield. But they got out, and they claimed that the entity followed them there. So kind of like you kind of had that feeling that was going to happen because it followed them to the campground and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so it followed them to Wilkes-Barre, and they said that the disturbances never really stopped. So there's no real happy ending to this story, unfortunately, but there's also no like big, crescendo like you see with a lot of the Warrens cases either.
It does say in your notes that they moved to Wilkes-Barre and then claimed the entity followed briefly before fading. So did it eventually fade away, maybe? Or
so from what I understand is, because there's conflicting reports on this, they say that the family never announced that the haunting ended. They just kind of reports of the hauntings faded. So the way I read that, they just stopped talking about it, or people stopped caring. But there was no like concrete resolution like you see with a lot of these Warren cases.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. You said skeptics point to stress, sleep paralysis, fabrication, and natural causes. But I mean, that's probably, there's no answer for this. But why them? And why would they be the ones that these spirits and demons attach themselves to follow them throughout their entire lives? Is there ever any indications as to why this could happen or how it could happen?
There's theories. So the one theory was related to the mining disasters in the 1800s.
Okay.
And there's a story from one of those mining disasters that the people that were doing the mining believed that they struck something old, ancient, and demonic and unleashed it. And it basically just laid dormant for 100 years. And then this Smurl family was just in the wrong place at the wrong time when this demon decided it was going to wreak havoc. That's one theory. Another theory was by the Warrens. They believed that one of the girls was playing with a Ouija board at one point and someone conjured the demon that way. But they never admitted to that. The girls swore up and down they never played with a Ouija board. So who knows? But those are a couple of theories.
So we got to remember that this haunting was over the course of 14 years. 15 years, right? Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
We threw a lot of stuff out there, but that's over a big span of time. But even before the Smurls moved in, residents of the town always kind of pointed at this house as the haunted house, and no one knows why. And maybe these are just like afterhand reports too, where people are adding to the story. But people that lived in the town said, oh yeah, we always, before they even moved in, we would point at that house, and that was every town has one, right? Every town you went through as a kid, you're like, oh, there's the haunted house of this town. And that was allegedly the haunted house of West Pittston here. So
you guys are missing the most important and obvious factor here. It was probably all about a haunted mirror that was really just trying to lure the Warrens in so they could have a big fist fight with the mirror.
I'm assuming that's what happened in the movie.
We promise no spoilers.
No spoilers. Might get a mirror fist fight. Who knows?
Kind of just wrapping up on this one, let's keep the movie separate from, church and state here. This seems like a pretty extreme case of a haunting. Do you guys agree? Is this standard operating procedure, or it seems like it's a little bit more intense than the norm?
I'd say it's standard for Ed and Lorraine Warren cases. They're always kind of big like this, but it definitely had some distinctions. Like I said, the flapping sound, right? I haven't heard that in any other haunting ever. That was weird, but it's, it was during the Satanic Panic. So there was a lot of demonic cases during that time period. I'm not saying that it was made up, but it could have been. The problem with that is that, there was so many other people involved that were experiencing this haunting also, that if not mass hysteria, then I don't know. But it's definitely one of the more grandiose ghost stories that we've covered.
I have a hard time thinking that it was fake. The skeptical arguments on this one are relatively weak, and we'd like to look into all of the skeptical arguments, but basically they're just saying it was mass hysteria. They're saying that Jack had gone through some electroshock therapy after, I believe it was Vietnam or something, and they're saying that he was just seeing stuff, so the whole family was seeing stuff. But it doesn't hold up because there's just too many witnesses. You had like 8 people in the house that every single one of them experienced the haunting, not just hearing things or seeing things, but feeling things, getting pushed downstairs, getting assaulted, watching the dog levitate and get slammed against a wall. And everybody had witnessed it in the house. And not only that, neighbors were experiencing it too when they weren't even home. So when they went off on their camping trip, the neighbors are still hearing all of these loud slams and this strange flapping sound and everything. And then you had priests who came in and stuff, and it's just tough. But the case, again, for the skeptics, they would say that the reason that the Catholic Church never officially got involved was because they didn't buy it.
So I can push back a little bit on this too, because I don't think the skepticism is completely unwarranted in this case. There are 0 verified witness accounts in this outside of the family, because every single one that the Warrens listed in their book, they had changed the names to protect the witnesses. So we don't know who the people are, right? The friend Erin, that was, that's just an alias that was given to her, and the Warrens never released the names of the actual witnesses. They also refused to let anybody else help with the investigation. There were several other organizations that wanted to help with this when it got really big. And there are scientific organizations that are known for going in and finding all the things that are debunkable. And Ed Warren said, nope, you're not in. And that's, raises a red flag for me, because if you're actually trying to help these people, why wouldn't you want to rule out the things that can be ruled out scientifically? And for him not to want to do that, I think raises a flag. The other thing is the Catholic Church not wanting to help. The Catholic Church would help on on demonic cases if there was enough good evidence to support it. The Warrens claimed they had video and audio evidence, but never released it. And if they released it to the church might have helped. But the fact that they didn't makes me believe that the Warrens didn't release any of it. And they never have to this day. They never released any of the information. They ended up passing away, and no one knows what happened to it. So
they also at one point claimed that it caught on fire, and then they still said they had it. So it was kind of flimsy on that as well.
Last question on this account. Why and once again, why is such a relative term, but you keep mentioning that the movie doesn't really follow this story. Why do you think that? Because this is such a fantastic, creepy story. Is it too much like the other ones, or is it just not what they're looking for from, I don't know, like bat wings is pretty crazy to me.
Yeah, It was disappointing to see, but I think that the way the Conjuring universe has gone now, and again, we're not going to spoil the movie too much, but they've kind of turned Ed and Lorraine Warren into like superheroes of the paranormal.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And because it's what's selling, you're talking about $1 trillion franchise here. Like they decided to focus the entire movie on the Warrens and make everything about the Warrens, and to a point where, because we know the story, maybe we consumed it a little bit differently, but at one point in the movie, we're looking at each other like, why aren't they covering any of this story? Like, we don't know what's going on in the house. We're following around, doing an engagement party.
Right.
Daughter. It is what it is. But
the other reason is they might have wanted to tell a story and be able to surprise people. So if they tell the exact same story that everybody already knows, it's like, whatever.
I don't think everybody knows that story though. Like people, this isn't Amityville. Everyone knows Amityville, and now everyone knows the original Conjuring story, but nobody knew the original Conjuring story for the most part until that first movie came out. Not on this scale. So nobody knew who the Smurls were. We did because we looked into it, but
but if you know the new Conjuring movie's coming out and you want to see what it's about, and you look into the Smurl haunting, then your movie's spoiled to anybody who wants to go see it. Go look it up before they go see it. So. I don't know. Maybe that's why, but it probably is more what you were saying, Jesse, where they just, the Ed and Lorraine Warren have main character syndrome. And
in fairness, though, the first 2 movies cover cases that Ed and Lorraine were just like sort of a small part of, that they sort of created a whole story about them being there around. I mean, the parents' father punched Ed in the face, right? Which is not depicted in the movie at all. So. I think they're just trying to follow a certain structure of a universe that they're creating. They wanted them to be, as Jesse said, superheroes, and they're the main people to vanquish these ghosts, essentially.
Well, once again, it's another crazy story involving the Warrens, and I'm sure it probably won't be the last. But to finish up today, Rob, you mentioned you had something here that's on a little bit more of a wrestling themed haunt.
Yeah, I was looking into ghost stories that either involved wrestlers as ghosts or or that a wrestler had, like an experience that a wrestler had. And I came across one of my favorite wrestlers' personal experiences, and that's Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Sure.
So this is verified because he has told this story on 2 separate shows. And so you can go look it up after. But essentially, he was out on the road. As your job entails, you're on the road quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
While he was on the road, his wife and his kids were calling him, saying that they were seeing a shadow figure in the house. One of his daughters was having nightmares about a shadow figure, and it was getting bad, like real bad. And he had never had any experiences in the home before. And he even states that he never believed in ghosts. And he got home around 5 or 6 p.m. one night, and his son, I believe it was Colton, ran out into the driveway, and he was scared, like pale, terrified. He's like, "Dad, there's a man in the house. I don't know what it is." And Piper, being a dad, wasn't thinking anything other than there's an intruder in the house. So
right.
He goes into his house, and he's looking around, and he goes into his study, and in his study, there's a log that fell out of the fireplace, and there was a small fire in front of his fireplace. So he's putting out his out this fire, and he looks to the side, and while he looks up, Adrian Adonis is standing over in the corner, and he goes, "Hey, Roddy." And for those of you but the one thing about it is he didn't look like the Adrian Adonis that we picture. He looked like Adrian Adonis when Piper met him when they were 22 years old. So he had the dark hair. He was wearing a black leather jacket.
Biker look, yeah.
Yeah. So at that point in time, he started believing that Adrian Adonis was at the house to look over him and his family.
Wow.
So I thought that was a really, really cool story. It's how Piper actually started believing in ghosts. And you've covered the Adrian Adonis tragedy on Dark Side of the Ring, which for those that don't know, he unfortunately passed away in a car accident.
Yeah. That's pretty creepy, man. And I had heard something from Hogan said that Piper texted him 2 days after he died and said, "I'm just loving you, my brother. I'm just walking with Jesus." So maybe Roddy had a little bit of a conduit to him. I was making a joke before that maybe he was probably just loaded, but I mean, I think Roddy was pretty serious when it came to certain things, and it wouldn't surprise me if he did see the Adrian thing. And Hogan was always known to exaggerate a little bit as well, but I had heard that story as soon as you mentioned Piper. I thought that might be it, but yeah. So apparently, not only did he see Adrian Adonis from beyond the grave, he sent a text to Hulk Hogan from beyond the grave as well. So
that's crazy.
Interesting.
What else is wide before we hop off here? Our very first time on your show, Chris, we had talked about the Sally House haunting. And since our last appearance on your show, we actually got the opportunity. We went out to the Sally House and did an overnight investigation there. And we haven't aired it yet, so I'm not going to spoil exactly what we got, but we'll have to send you the clip of one of the Spirit Box communications that we got, because it is absolutely chilling.
Spoiler alert, I've already sent it to Chris and he has seen it.
So Chris,
which one was that?
What did you think about the clip that I absolutely knew that you got? This was at the Sally House.
Without spoiling it, because we haven't aired that.
When did you send it to me, Rob?
Like 2 or 3 months ago.
I'll have to rewatch it because I don't recall. But is it a spoiler type thing? You can tell me what happened in it.
I'll just say, let's see if you remember. Dave was in a room with dolls circled around him, and he asked a question to the Spirit Box. And he got the response.
Yeah, that was. You see that stuff and you think, "Oh, come on, man!" But I know you guys aren't gonna fabricate that. It's insane what is out there and the stuff that you can hear. I mean, it's really messed up, man. And that you guys are experiencing this and knowing it for real is amazing. And like we said, you guys have been doing this now for the better part of probably 7-8 years. So, once again, you're always welcome to come back whenever we have cool topics to discuss. And this one is a creepy one for sure. So, always a blast to have you guys here, and look forward to the next one.
Absolutely, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks so much for having us on. Yeah.